So hello to everyone.
Tell me.
I'll be switching off the comments right now, and in the last
Okay.
15 minutes I'll switch them back on. Otherwise, you won't be able to see Anu talking because somehow with
Absolutely.
Instagram that's what happens.
Yeah.
So yes. Okay.
Okay. Oh.
Wow. So
Better.
better, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you to Bate for getting us both here and for giving us this chance to talk. Actually, Bate had asked me if I knew somebody who was working in textiles in space and
Okay.
not do, the conventional textiles that people know of. And somehow the first person I
Okay.
thought of was you, because I've been following the retirement plan for quite some time now, and I remember when you even started it. So I'm really glad that you
Yeah.
could take out time to do it. Thanks.
अरे time ही है यार. These days there's only time. I think that's one thing we can't complain about, that I don't have the time to do this today.
That's true. That's why so many family calls have started now, because you can't say that you're not there.
No, for those you can always say that I'm too busy.
So
Tell
I
me.
want to also just tell everyone how I met Anu. This was, so I joined in IT 2005 and I convocated 2010. And at that time, Aditi Ranjan, she gave us, me and my batchmate is Vishnu, and she told us about this project of DITPP. And it was exciting. It was a block printing project. It was export related, and it was supposed to be something which would finally have an output in an exhibition outside. So, first commercial project. So we were quite excited about it, and we land up in Jaipur, and we're sitting in this room, and I still have this vision of that room. I know where we met, because we're sitting and there are all these other designers, and there's me and there's Vishnu, and everyone starts introducing themselves just to be friendly. And Anu starts, and Anu's like, yeah, so I joined in ID in 1987. And I just look at Vishnu, because I'm like, I was born in 1987. And I was like, Vishnu, there are people here who have decades of experience, and this is like our first maiden project. So actually, it was intimidating for me. But
I was more intimidated by you guys, because I was like, am I going to be too staid and too sort of market kind of savvy or spontaneous like these girls? And I was like, oh God, where have I landed? And this was another thing that Gitto called me and said, "Arey kar le, it'll be nice, come to Jaipur," that kind of thing. So I said, chalo. And Jaipur is always, I mean, I'm a sucker for Rajasthan.
No, but I have to say that despite the age gap, or what I should say, seniority, when you started interacting with us, you sort of very beautifully took us under your wing and helped us out throughout that year, because that was a project that we were doing for the first time. We didn't know how to negotiate, we didn't know how to talk, we didn't know how to stand for our rights and everything. And all of you, all the senior designers there, you really sort of took care of us kiddos. So that's what I think is the beauty of having a community that's an ID, because it just makes you connect so seamlessly. You don't feel like you're from somewhere else.
It is one of those very strange things that we always felt, that 5 years before us and 5 years after us were all our batch. Everybody who was on campus while you were there was always someone you knew as intimately as maybe somebody who was in your batch. And it never, senior tha, junior tha, it never sort of occurred. So at our time, because the batches were so small and numbers were so few, there was initial maybe like the first 6 months, people took some time to get used to each other. But once that happened, everybody was like one big family.
But when you mean small, how small is the batch?
Oh, my batch was 7 postgraduate. We were 7 of us. My graduating batch was 21, which was including all of PEP, all of AEP, all disciplines. So we
Wow.
were 21 in 89.
I know I'm going to request you to put your phone, like tilt your phone a little bit so I can see your
A little
neck.
bit?
Yeah.
Ah, okay. Okay.
But you talked about Gitto inviting you over to the GITP project in 2011. But you worked with Gitto, right? You told me that in the beginning of your post.
Yeah, so Gitto was my guide for my diploma project. I worked for Anokhi for my diploma, and I think Anokhi for a long time didn't take students. I mean, didn't give out diploma projects. So I think Romani was one, and then there was a long gap, and then there was she she took me on, and after that Gitto was my guide, so that was perfect. Then once I finished my diploma, there was a project on at NID called it was a DC Handlooms project. It was a wool development project. So it was like many products, but there was like floor coverings, there was garments, there was all kinds of stuff. And I worked with Gitto on the garments. So again, like I told you, it was one of those times when she said, "Ha, go to Kutch and pick up fabrics." Or she would say, "Okay, go to Himachal, Kinnaur." I said, "Kinnaur, like also it has to be exciting. The place has to be exciting." So I said Kinnaur, and she said, "Yeah, yeah, go to Kinnaur." No contact, no lead, no nothing. So everything was like self-initiated, self-motivated, and yeah, go and find out, pick up material, come back, design your range, and it's perfect. So it was one of those amazing projects that I did with Gitto, and we've shared a very good rapport. So I think it was just a breeze.
Well, for those of you who are listening to Anu's work for the first time, I have to say that she did her graduation in sculpture from Delhi College of Art, and when she started working, her work range goes from, like, she's talking about garments with Gitto. She's worked in costumes for
Sai Paranjpur.
Yes.
Yeah, for television and for film.
Television and film costumes, art direction.
Yes.
And since you did postgrad at NID, which was just 2 years, but you've actually then
No, in our times it wasn't 2. In our times it was 3 at the least. In my batch we were 3 at the end of it, and I graduated in 3 years. It was 3.5 years. So
that's almost that for us.
Yeah, it was much longer than it is now. In fact, most courses in our time were much longer. A shorter course meant that. Is it on?
Yeah, you're back.
Is it on?
Yeah.
Spent at the NID was nothing. No time was. I always felt that some things could have been longer, even longer than we because a lot of things like the practical bits of weaving, a lot of us, some of us made our prototypes, some couldn't because it takes a long time. So we would stay back during vacations and do our prototypes. But now I don't know how much that happens because the courses have become shorter and the load is the same. So textiles is a sort of very intensive kind of course. So I guess the children are missing out on, students are missing out on the actual hands-on doing of textiles.
But tell me about your time at NID, Anu, because I remember you were bouncing off in between different departments a lot. Because
I think our times were very fluid. No one sort of stopped you from doing, or it wasn't like structured courses that you had a thing of multidisciplinary kind of exercise that you had to do. In any course, any time you wanted to work in other materials, you were most welcome to. You could just go across. I would work in Is it on?
Yeah, it's on, but your voice
Can
is
you hear me?
breaking. Yeah.
There's the connection. There was a bad connection. So I think in our times it was much more fluid as a space, and we all were richer for it, because I see so many of my contemporaries who've not necessarily pursued textiles, and a lot of contemporaries who were people who did ceramics, or who did product, or who did something, and who are doing textiles now. So it was just a very kind of loose, not loose in that sense, but it wasn't that kind of rigid a space. And we as people also were encouraged to think freely, out of the box, all the time, sort of, challenging what our space was, what our and I really think that it made us so much much more rounded, well-rounded as designers.
You actually had told me this story also about you used to spend so much time in animation.
Yeah, so somebody was getting married, and they gave out a card which read, to the animation gang, Anu, Shoma, Basav, and Murthy. And Anu was not even in animation, so it was just one of those things that you just were always with the whatever fancied you there at that point. You just went there, and I did one course with a designer called Jan Baker. I was very keen on using. She was going to take a workshop of I think Japanese bookbinding techniques, and I said, look, I have to do this, because I've never sort of had the opportunity, or will be getting an opportunity to do something like this. So I went and enrolled, and she said, look, it's very intensive in terms of materials and clamps and this and that, but in case there is a space, I will let you come in. And the day before the course started, she said, come, we have one place vacant, you can come. So for almost 2 weeks, I did bookbinding with her, and it's so amazing, because it has nothing to do with anything I would have done in textiles. Maybe not, but maybe yes, because there are so many of us who add on these little skills or these little interests, and then take them much further than they started off. So I think that that was amazing in our times.
Well, this brings me to a question that one person has asked actually, that how did you decide what you wanted to do? So considering that you had all these interests and that you used to do so many things, and you've done sculpture, then you entered textiles, but you did animation, you did leather, you also were very active in the ceramics department. So how is it that you sort of decided the next steps?
I think I've never planned anything. I've gone with the flow. I've gone with what comes naturally at that point. And honestly, it sort of unravels, or it unfolds very, very organically for me. I'm not a planner. I'm not somebody who's rigid about how things, like very often things you have to backtrack on something. And a lot of people are shattered when that happens, you have to shut your studio, or you have to do something like that. And I feel that maybe that there's something else that's more interesting happening around the corner. So why do you have to like hang on to something for life?
Right.
It's not going to be always what you chart. You don't chart everything, and you don't plan everything. You apply as much of that of yourself to any situation, and it will be yours. So you
Right.
can't be like, oh, I can't work without this, or I can't survive without that. Or it never worked like that for me.
You also told me about how it was about priorities that you sort of set up. That's one of the ways where you decided your sort of course in life. Like, how does one actually decide what to do in life, or what to spend time in? Because as designers, we actually do have multiple directions. And after a student especially, how does one sort of choose what course one takes?
Again, I'll go back to the same thing. What feels right, you apply yourself 100%. It might be something that changes after a point. It takes another direction. But again, as long as you apply yourself to it 100%, your passions have to be there, your sort of interest has to be there, and your application has to be there. Besides that, nothing else matters really. So I just think that the way you sort of relate to what you're doing is, the journey is the important bit. Destination can happen, not happen. I believe that it's the traveling that is the exciting part. The arriving can be good, might not be good, but I think that that's important, very important.
So, like post NID, what did you start with?
So as soon as like at my diploma jury, my client was Anokhi, as you know. So Anokhi was working with some architects from Ahmedabad, and they wanted Faith to recommend someone who would work with them on textiles for that project. And Faith recommended me, so they came and saw my jury presentation. And they took me on for a project where it was a renovation and restoration of a palace in Udaipur. So on that project, I worked for 3 years, and it was, I mean, it changed everything about the way you think of textiles. It was a complete unlearning, relearning, because from the Scandinavian minimalist sort of Bauhaus kind of background, we came to velvets and opulence and something completely out of your comfort zone. And you had to, because that space does need that kind of textile. So it was an amazing experience.
But what did you do in that, in the restoration of the palace?
So basically, it was a space that had been shut down for some 8-10 years and had gone to seed, and it had finally been reopened, and then entire thing had to be refurbished. So the refurbishing of one part of the palace was where the Maharana would be living, and that was one major part. Then once the work got over, he wanted to have another part of the palace as his private guest house. So those were the two projects. Of course, at the end of it, the guest house that he planned turned out really good. I mean, it turned out really amazing. And he then opened it now. It's now a boutique hotel. So, people can go and stay there.
And your inputs in it, Anu, like, was it restricted to doing just the textile bits of it?
Not really. Because once you're there, it's not like a very sort of cut and dry project. So I was telling you about this, that the second space, which was the Fateh Prakash Palace, we needed lights for the entire sort of, like, I think it was 6 rooms or something, 6 suites. And the normal thing would be go to the market or source something from Delhi or whatever. And I was adamant. I said, no, we have so much in our storerooms that we have to start using them. So Arvind Singh said, nah, who's going to, like, they won't have pairs, you won't be able to find the shades. So I said, give me a day, I'll set them out. And I just set rows and rows of lights, which was so beautiful, the authentic, original pieces, which you can't even find anymore. And we just had to replate them and sort of wire them, and you could use every one of them. Plus, they added so much more to the space, because these were original fixtures versus some generic kind of stuff that you'd find in the market and maybe every other hotel in the city. So I felt that this was something that I always felt, that when you have something, why don't we repair and reuse rather than go out and buy new stuff? Because we already have so much. Everything that we have has a much longer life than we actually use it for.
So it sort of sounds like your roots for the retirement plan had started much earlier.
I think every one of us have been grown up in India of a certain time, was so used to using, reusing, repairing, sort of hand-me-downs. Not one of us wore clothes that not necessarily belong to us. They were either hand-me-downs from cousins or sisters, or you handed them down to somebody else. And apart from clothes, everything else was always repaired and reused. We were so sort of careful with what we used. The throwing bit, even now, I mean, even something as simple as leftover something in the fridge, you can't get yourself to chuck it in the garbage bin. If it's okay to eat, how can you just chuck it away? So I find that all of us it was so sort of strongly ingrained in our upbringing that we didn't waste. We couldn't waste, which is changing to a large extent now.
But we're also sort of coming back to realizing
a lot of what we find. That's the thing. That's what I was going to say, that a lot of the revival that's happening now, a lot of the zero waste and no buying sort of year. My daughter had a whole year when she said, I don't want to buy anything this year. I'm going to only use what I have, or I'm going to borrow, or I'm going to do something of that sort. It's exactly what was done very naturally, without any labels or any kind of I would say sort of some kind of drive or some kind of trend that you were following. It was the normal thing that you bought clothes for a couple of events or occasions in the year. You bought things for the house on certain times, at certain times of the year. You didn't go out to, okay, Amazon sales, so just buy for the whole thing and just.
Oops, I think we're.
Can you hear me?
Your network is slightly slow now.
Yes.
Is
it okay now? Yeah.
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 So Anu, I'm going to move to like post you finished with the palaces, you had to move to Mumbai, right?
Yeah, I got married, so I moved to Mumbai. I'd never been. I mean, I'd visited, but I'd never been to Bombay, and it scared the life out of me. I was so used to Ahmedabad and do what you want, when you want, take a rickshaw, go to Teen Darwaza, do something, come back. Here you had to plan everything. You had to plan one trip in the day if you had to go from the suburbs to the town, as they call it. The entire day is gone. And I said, my God, how do people manage in this space? It was so fast. It was like so, it was an assault to the senses. There was no space for anything. You couldn't think without like a barrage of sounds and, visuals. It was something else. So my initial year or two was a bit of a sort of culture shock for me.
But then, for a place which has such long distances and such limited time, you sort of jumped into art direction for television, which again is like something that has really
the pace, totally. So I just think that you take what you are dealt with and then you make the best of it. But the best was something else. It was so interesting. There were so many aspects to it. Again, television was interesting. I did costumes for like a period, not period, but it was basically something based on the Bible. So it was a very sort of research intensive kind of project, where the client was very he was very clear that he wanted a very authentic representation of the period, not not a generic kind of look. So we researched. We had a library in Chennai where the books were all about the various times and various sort of cities or towns that the Bible actually unraveled. This was the Old Testament. So the everything was very true and authentic in that the costumes, the artifacts, the props, everything had to be researched,
But
and
Anu,
that was
what? No, sorry, but I was just
yeah.
saying, what part of NID's education sort of prepared you for, this sort of jump into art direction, which,
Like I
doing.
said, NID of our times was not a limiting space. It was not a space which told you that, okay, you are a textile designer. It didn't, it sort of just equipped you to be a designer. Then how you apply, what you apply to what was up to you and your sort of I think your strengths. So if I think also because I was someone from the sort of fine arts and sculpture. Sculpture is very three-dimensional. I did not have a problem with spaces. I did not have a problem with color, with application, with all that. So I think I don't take it very seriously in terms of the categories. I don't take those seriously, and that helps to make you a generalist instead of a specialist. But
Right.
specialist, when you are applying to that specific task, I think that specialization has to be there. But it can't be that, oh, I'm a textile designer only. I'm a designer to start with, and then what I take it, where I apply it is not is something that I will not restrict myself to.
Right. And I mean, then when you're working in, say, you worked in the export sector, like in the industry for many years actually after
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
And you also worked as a consultant, like you didn't really work on like as an employee. Um, what kind of
I'm not
what
cut
kind of
out to be an employee.
experience was that?
So again, it was one of those things that just sort of happens. So I met someone who wanted to hire a textile designer. They were just starting out. They ended up being a really interesting design house, sort of textile design space. But they were at that point they were just starting. They were like 6 months into the business, and we worked very well together. So initially, I would just do collections for them, and slowly the collections, also the interpretation and the sort of collection is not just the design; it's also application and sort of the issuing out of the prototypes, the sampling. All that is very important. And then we felt that unless I was involved in all those stages, I wouldn't be. I mean, it wouldn't be doing justice to my designs. And
Right.
then I started going in like thrice a week or something to sort of, and those I couldn't be somebody who said, oh, this is not part of my job or something. It was just
Right.
very, very interesting work, and we worked together for almost 15 years.
And
So
Anu, some of us have this misconception that industry means that you're doing like really cut and dry work. But
yeah,
from what you have done, you've actually also worked a lot in crafts while you were working in this export house. Like for example,
yeah,
the time when you worked with the basketry.
yeah. So this exporter was someone who was very sort of imaginative, very sort of adventurous person. She wanted to always do something that hadn't been done, and she was very astute. She had a very clever, very good eye. So she knew what if there was something that was happening internationally, there would be some kind of percolation down to application in India. So we could be making something that maybe was in home, not necessarily in textile. But
Right.
if the trend had started, she would be able to identify the trend. And then very often we would travel together. We'd go to Milan and Paris and various other places where we would go and just walk the streets, because just the way the windows are done, just the way the the spaces are set up, it gives you a kind of feel for it. It was never like mood boards or that. It wasn't that structured. So we always felt that you can't be a market leader unless you sort of uh, you set out the trends, you make the trend. Because if you're going to follow a trend, then you are just one of many. But if you take that risk and if you set a trend, then either it bombs or you are the beneficiary because you are the first ones to do that thing. So
Right.
in terms of material, like nobody was doing leather in home in tabletop, like in cushions or in in placemats or runners. Nobody was using leather. Uh, we were the first ones to do a range of leather mats and cushions and stuff. Another time we started doing this material, which was a plastic gutting. So the caning that you use. So
Yeah.
in mostly in the south, in Maharashtra also, but a lot of everybody has this tiffin carrier kind of basket, which is made out of that plastic strapping.
Yeah.
It was something that is there everywhere, but we managed to sort of do products which were more for the home. So for outdoor cushions, for laundry baskets, it was an ideal material, as well as it was not something that had been sort of customized for the Western market. So
Okay.
we used the sort of the material, but we got it dyed to colors for that was part of our palette, and that
Right.
became an amazing product. And then I see it still going strong. I see people still doing that, and it was amazing because we were the first ones to do it.
And when did you decide to sort of then go solo? Like, just break off from.
So I think around 2007-8, when the recession happened, uh, the market was completely dead. Nobody wanted to take a risk. Nobody wanted to sort of sell or manufacture something that was even slightly risky. And there was no challenge left. I didn't find it interesting to do textiles just for the sake of it. Uh, it was a time when things had become a little too safe, and that was
Okay.
not me. I don't relate to that. So for a while I did I did some jewelry for a bit. I worked with sort of for the interiors of a museum, like textiles for a museum, but not the regular textiles that I was doing till then.
Okay.
And I just think that it was a time of a lot of introspection, because you'd been doing similar stuff. I mean, it was very definitely, there was a lot of there was nothing that was uh, in any way repetitive, but you felt that maybe it was a time to rethink and realign what your priorities were. And it was an amazing time because I went on a holiday with the family to Greece, and we were living up on a hill. With the further up on the hill, there was a small studio. It was a ceramic studio, and the man and the son were ceramic artists, and the wife was she had retired from she was an accountant. She had retired and come back to her village, and she had a frame loom, and she was sitting there and weaving. And
Okay.
from her house, all you could see was the ocean. It was like almost 260 degrees of ocean. And she's making this beautiful handloom fabric. She's making some, olive oil soap. She's making some teddy bears. And that's her retirement. And I said, my God, if this is what your retirement is, then it has to be the best time of your life. Because if you're going to be doing what you always wanted to do in a place that is like magical, then I just said, this is it. So I said, now I have to think what I'm going to look like, start aiming for. And that got me thinking about what I should what really makes me tick, what I would want to do, what I haven't been able to do to its fullest. And that obviously meant going solo. It also meant working hands-on with craftsmen, because that was something that I had no patience for sitting in an office and issuing out notes, and it was not my scene. So these two things were definitely it. And the third thing that I always, it rankled, it always sort of upset me, was the amount of waste that comes out of small industries. In Bombay, if you go to any small manufacturing unit or sort of industrial estate, every small unit has a big bin of perfectly good material that they've thrown out, because that's the leftover of ends or scrap from what they're making. So if a bindi guy is making bindis, the sheet of felt or whatever the material is punched through, and the rest of the sheet is thrown away. But that sheet that is thrown away is the same material that is being sold, that the person is selling as bindis. So it's beautiful material, it's very good, but it's not used again.
Right.
And once it gets clubbed with the canteen waste or other garbage, it adds to landfills. It becomes a menace, and it's of no use. So I used to always think, why don't we just take up this material from all these small units and make something out of it, and again, this is something that sort of always was at the back of my mind, that I have to work with something that is discards from industry. It can't be virgin material, because there's always something you can do with virgin material, but nobody has the time or nobody has the initiative to work with waste. So that I was very clear that it had to be something that had already been used for something else, and I would find a fresh sort of application for that. So these were the sort of germs that were there in my head, which started sort of taking root. And I think it was a trip to Ahmedabad, which also was parallelly to other things, but we've always found that material, the ropes made out of chindi in Teen Darwaza.
Yeah.
And that seemed to be such a beautiful material to start with. It was inexpensive. It was very, very sort of random and beautiful. And I said, why don't I use something like this? Because I had no clue what I wanted to do with it. I mean, I had absolutely no idea. But I bought like some 50 kilos of it and brought it back to Bombay. Once here, I went around. There are a lot of cane weavers in Bombay, where I live. And I went with a couple of bundles to every one of them and said, kuch karo, I want to do something with this. And they would don't waste our time. So this is too thick, this is too stiff, this is something. So they would not in. One guy just happened to be that he said, let's do something. So whatever he was making, he was weaving a stool. And I said, isse karo. So start weaving with this. And he was game. So he did that. And it turned out so beautiful. I still have it, because that piece was so magical. I said, my God, we are onto something, and let's do something about it. So again, we started sort of innovating. We started doing frames that were more the way that I would like the frames to be. We started sort of working on sort of stories in terms of having some kind of a collection. But it was very difficult because the material is random, extremely random. So this is split ply split. So this is another material which is plastic waste. So it is out of
right.
So basically, I felt that the material has a very random quality about it, which doesn't allow you to do more than one piece of the same.
I'm going to just show some of the pictures of your products exhibited while you're talking.
Yeah. I'll tell you about them also if there's something to tell.
I'm going to start with the design lab
Yeah.
one.
Okay. So that was in the first few years. It's 2015, I think. So this was a countrywide kind of um, sort of, it was a competition for products, and Godrej wanted to put together a set of excuse me products that they would help promote. Excuse me,
पानी पी लो यार थोड़ा.
इतना बोलना पड़ रहा है.
Well, I'm going to talk, then I'll take over while you rest your throat a little bit.
Yeah.
Just to tell people that I was asking Anu once that how did you really start? Because you started making these products and you started using the thing that you learned at NID about weaving, and then you had a very strong color sensibility. And you started making these products, but how did it actually kick off? And that's when she said that, well, she had a friend, a product designer friend, who had a warehouse, which was earlier used like a storage unit, and then he decided to clean it all up and to have like an exhibition, and he selected a few designers, and they all came, and he was like, yeah, come in, this like display your product, and things kicked off from there. And they got some press, they got some publicity, and the next thing is that people, that's how things just start rolling. Because I was talking to Anu, and she's not a person who does any self-promotion, and which is why I really wanted to know that if you're starting solo and you're going all on your own and you're not publicizing your work also, then what are the ways that you actually got your work out there? And this one that's there, Design Lab by Godrej, that was one of the few exhibitions that actually she did. There's one which was done for Delhi Craft Council. I'm sorry that the image is sort of getting cropped on its own, but that's
Yeah, so
some
these are double tires, the ones that are there. These are double tires with the wrapping. The weaving is done in the wrapping plastic waste. These Craft Council had a 50-year sort of exhibition in Delhi, very, very well sort of showcased. Quite a few NID designers exhibited. And in fact, I had to tell them that please put a for sale sign at the door, because everybody thinks they're coming for an art exhibition. It was done so beautifully. But again, so this is Craft Council. Yeah, these were also for Craft Council.
Is this also? This is also.
Yeah.
And then we have some from London Design Week.
Yeah, so this is the LDF was, they again had one of the shows was sustainability driven. So in fact, if you see the display, it's done on baked bean cans. So it's baked bean cans which are made into a platform, and some sort of board which is again sort of out of wood shavings, which was used as so the entire exhibition was also done very sort of sustainable and very green. And after that, they donated all the cans to a soup kitchen. So it was an interesting sort of experience being at the London Design Festival.
So Anu, but what part of working in the industry sort of helped you in sort of taking your decisions for your own solo venture? Like, what were the things that sort of you took from those 15 years of working, and of course all of it before that? Does something help with working in like an export market where you're designing for a different sort of audience, and here you're doing something on your own with the material that you're trying to control and creating it into products which are very specific?
So I think a lot of your aesthetic, especially when you worked with international markets, is more geared towards a kind of contemporary, a Western kind of aesthetic, which most of us in the domestic market are not able to grasp so easily. So having worked in the export market, that was something that was a strength that I guess I over the years it had become very strong, that I could sort of work on any palette, I could work on any collection, and it wasn't something that I didn't relate to. It wasn't important that if I related to it or I didn't, and that I think has come to my work now as well, because it doesn't mean that color is just language. It doesn't mean that it has to be a certain kind. You have to be able to express through color. So
Right.
like the picture that you have, it is it's basically an inspiration from a Fulkari piece. Now the whole thing is that where your inspiration comes from is not important, but how you actually translate it into a piece that has a presence, that has a sort of impact. That is that is what happens when you are able to really like sort of internalize the inspirations. So I think that is something that I've carried from exports, because exports is in some ways, some things are completely not how you would relate to a sort of inspiration or a mood board or something, but you still have to make it work. So that I think was very important, because, and the other thing is that a lot of practical kind of managing of material, which you tend to take for granted, because if you're looking to make something that is very sort of special, you don't think of the practical aspects of manufacturing it, because once you have to make the same thing in numbers, the whole sort of sourcing, the production, everything gets impacted by your design. And
Right.
unless the design takes that into account to start with, the product will never sort of get the kind of market that it deserves. So that is something that it sort of becomes almost second nature to you, that when you are designing, how much of the impact does every aspect you might be very attached to your design, but does that really translate to what the buyer or final consumer is going to be prepared to sort of buy it for?
Pay for, yeah.
Yeah, so you are not going to be able to justify certain designs if you are sort of taking months over one sort of one creation, because the market cannot work like that. It might be a
I'm gonna take
masterpiece,
some.
but it's
No, go ahead. I'm gonna take some questions actually, Anu, because I realized that
yeah, sure.
we're all done with the hour. I didn't figure that
Oh, really?
earlier. Yeah.
I didn't realize that either. Yeah.
Well, there's a question from Tanishka, who's asking, how do you view the idea of failure in your journey? Quick answers, Anu. There are a lot of questions.
I don't think there's anything called failure. I mean, I think these are things that you have to, like I said, it's the journey. Failure is an outcome. So I don't see an outcome being impacting the journey, because when you were doing something, there was a lot of learning, there was a lot of self realization that happens while you're going through that, and that cannot be nullified by what the outcome of that. So I don't think anything is a failure. I don't think there is anything that you can classify as, okay, I failed at it. You can't have failed at it, because there's so many other things that have come out of that journey.
Right. Another question is that what are your thoughts on textile courses being taken online during this pandemic? That's definitely my student.
That's a tough one. I also think that online attention spans can be very short, and looking at a screen for too long can give you brain freeze. So
Yeah.
I don't know how much. Yeah, I don't know how much and how, unless it's small capsules of sort of giving instructions and then carrying out your own explorations on your own and sharing it. So it has to be interspersed with actual exercises and work that you do, which you then go back. It can't be prolonged kind of lectures or because it just doesn't work. I mean, it's so much of it is learning by doing, and how can you have classes really that do justice to a course?
There's another question by Ayushi saying, can you pick out one thing which is somehow vaporized in today's design education system?
That is?
That has vaporized in today's design education system.
Oh, time.
Time.
Nobody has the time for education. Everything has to be a quick fix. And I think that we have the luxury. I mean, the years that you spend learning are the most, that's the greatest luxury anybody can have. That you are not required to fend for yourself or earn your living or, it's just the pursuit of knowledge, which is, it's amazing. So I don't know how and when that thing changed, and we became this sort of caught up with these timelines. And yes, it just, I don't understand.
Okay, Anushka is asking you. This is like a rapid question session, Anu, because we've lost time. Like you said, it's the most valuable thing.
They can always write into me. They can write into me, give them my email or on WhatsApp, and please, if you want to ask me anything, please write in, and I'll definitely answer. Yeah.
And she's also on Instagram as The Retirement Plan.
Oh yes, both Instagram and Facebook, The Retirement Plan.
So there's a question by Anushka saying, how do you go about analyzing whether a new design would be accepted and used by the consumers?
So, I love to interact directly with customers. Even the smallest of shows, exhibitions, I love to be there myself. It's very difficult because you have to take out 2, 3, 5 days of your time and be there. And it might not be really worth it in the normal kind of sense, but I find it worth it because I can get feedback from the actual consumers. And it's so sweet because there are some people, like there's a show in Calcutta called the India Story. And I love to do that show because the customers in Bengal, I mean, at least Calcutta, are so evolved and so sort of aesthetics is a very strong part of their lives. And there've been people who've come and said, I don't want to buy anything, but I can just stand and look at your work because it gives me a lot of joy. And I said, look, that's how it should be. You're looking at a creation and you're feeling happy. And that's most important. Whether you buy or you don't buy is not important. So I think that being there directly, sort of interacting with your customers or with your clients is very important. Distancing yourself will eventually lead to a slow kind of deterioration in your work.
I think this also sort of answers Purnachi's question, who's saying how crucial is it to stop and have a breather to allow yourself some retrospection time, even as an individual.
All the time. Put down, switch off your phones, watch the rain, sit and look at, cook, I don't know, plant something, go out and, go for a ride or a drive or whatever. But basically just you don't have to be doing something all the time. That is something that is very important. Yeah.
Well, this is the last 1.5 minutes of our talk, Anu. Before it gets cut off abruptly, I want to thank you for coming and thank you for sharing. The thing is that when we first met you, which was 10 years ago, you were so open and you shared insights so beautifully. And that was like a soft mentorship, which I think everybody actually can benefit from.